Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. And way back in January, our first show, I think it was our second show, we sent Mary Beth Carozza to Annapolis to represent us at the State House. And she's back to tell us what happened. So how was it?
Well, thank you for having me back. It was exciting, it was historic, and I believe we had a successful session all the way around.
I just read in the Salisbury Independent today, the headline was it was a successful session, but you were interviewed a lot in that story, so I guess that's why it said that.
Well, I wanted to start by just talking about fiscal responsibility in the budget. As you well know, when I was on the campaign trail, that's what I heard day in and day out as I knocked on those doors. And I am here to say today that we began to make progress in reining in our state spending and putting Maryland's fiscal house in order.
Now, when you were going up there, you thought you might get another committee, economic development, economic matters, right? But no, you got the big committee, appropriations, House appropriations, so you were very much a part of this budget process.
The assignment to Appropriations Committee was, I think, a great match for my strengths as far as being a good generalist and having the opportunity to work on the budget and to have the opportunity to be on the committee that would look at state spending and have the opportunity to work on a budget that indeed started to lower our state spending overall.
So what's the number for people who pay attention to this? What numbers are we talking about?
So we ended up with a $40 billion budget. The highlight would be that we now have a budget that only increased spending by 1.4%. The reason that's significant, the past 5 to 6 years or more, it's been along the lines of 5 to 8% increases. So we're very happy about that, and we passed a budget with no tax increases.
So that's pretty cool. And your committee, certainly there was your committee chairman, Delegate Maggie McIntosh, was very involved in the budget negotiations at the end. Things went well on the budget early, and then at the end there were some problems, but it all worked out.
There was a process here, and it started with the governor. Had the governor not introduced a budget that eliminated the structural deficit in 1 year as the marker, we never would have made the progress we ended up making on the overall budget in the end. So you had a process where the governor submitted that budget, and we on the House Appropriations Committee with Chairman McIntosh in charge started to work on that budget. We ended up passing, and I supported a House budget that also went along the lines with the budget, with the governor's budget for the most part, but there were parts of it that I was not comfortable with. There were some separate votes. For example, I was not comfortable with the raid on the state employees' pensions. They wanted to take some of that money to use for other priorities. I voted against that provision, and that actually ended up being one of the provisions that caused the consternation in the end when many of us as Republicans voted against the final conference report because it did not protect the pension, and it also did not go and eliminate the out years structural deficit that many of us are committed to working on.
What did you learn up there that you didn't know before?
Well, first of all,
you've been involved in state government very deeply.
First of all, divided government can work. And I had a positive experience on my House Appropriations Committee. I was involved in the pre-decision meetings. I was, able to bring some of the priorities and concerns of the shore to my committee. There were some specific issues. I met with the chairman of the Health Subcommittee, Craig Zucker, dealing with issues with PRMC and AGH and some of our physicians. I was able to bring those concerns directly to the chairman. I was able to work directly with Chairman McIntosh. There were days that I would just pop down there, let her know that I had questions, that it's a very complicated budget process, and I wanted to make sure I better understood what the next step was in the budget process. So that was a positive experience as far as I do believe that we do have divided government, and I believe it can work, and you're going to see you will see when we agree, and you will see when we disagree. As I said, during that budget process, the fact that the governor introduced a budget that put the marker out there for bringing in our state spending. You saw a divided government when there was the raid on the pensions, and some of us not comfortable with that and trying to get that changed. I believe that as we move ahead in next year's budget, we'll be able to address some of these issues on the front end. Keep in mind that Governor Hogan now will have a whole year to work on a new budget, whereas he came in and had to submit a budget 2 days after he was inaugurated.
Right. Now, the former chairman of the committee that you were on was Norm Conway. Do you see yourself as a continuation for local representation on that committee, or?
I am taking this opportunity to serve, and I do believe it's a good assignment for me. I am looking for opportunities where I can match the priorities of the shore to my work on the committee. And as you well know, appropriations, because it's so general as far as its focus and reaches across all of state government, I believe that gives me the opportunity to work on the shore's priorities, not only in the legislature, but also directly with Governor Hogan's administration.
Now, as a freshman delegate, you're not supposed to have any victories. You're supposed to sort of keep to yourself and sort of sit in the back, but you got some stuff done.
I made a decision early on to just introduce 2 bills on my own, and that's a small number compared to other delegates. But I thought, well, let me take these 2 and let's see what type of progress we might be able to make in this first session. And I'm very excited. One of the bills is an economic development bill for Worcester County, although it can be expanded to other counties if those other counties want to pursue it. And this allows for a limited distillery license, which would allow secrets and other businesses in Worcester County, should they choose to do so, to actually have limited production of spirits rather than what Secrets is doing now, which is going to Delaware for the manufacture of their spirits and then bringing it back to Ocean City and back to Worcester County. So when I saw there was an opportunity to take some economic development and business from another state, Delaware, and bring it back to Maryland, I thought this would be a great opportunity to work with our business community. And Senator Mathias introduced the bill cross-filed on the Senate side, and we were able to see that bill all the way through.
And then there was one here locally with the veterans.
Yes, this one was a really heavy lift, and I'm excited about this bill. This is a veterans procurement bill. It's to allow our veterans to have more of an opportunity to contract with state government. Right now, the percentage is 0.5%, which is low. By getting the 0.5% in place, that started the process. I came in and introduced a bill that would raise the percentage to 5%. What I came up against, what I was facing, the challenge there is that the leadership on the House side did not want to do individual pieces of procurement. They want to do overall procurement reform, which they're planning to do next session. So they wanted to basically put the Veterans Procurement Bill, my Veterans Procurement Bill, on hold.
Right.
I appealed to them, and I went to the leadership. I went to the chairman of the Health and Government Operations Committee. I went to my own chairman, Chairman McIntosh, and I said, I completely support and want to be part of the team that works on overall procurement reform. And the reason that's important, because if we do this right, working with the governor's office, we can actually save $100 million over 4 years. So I agree with them on what they want to do with overall reform, and I actually volunteered and said, if you want a worker bee from another committee other than Health and Government Operations, from Appropriations, I would like to be part of that. But in the meantime, we have a situation where our veterans are already bumping up against that 0.5 cap. and that we need to expand our opportunities for veterans to be able to bid on state contracts. So during this whole back and forth process, which I learned a lot and spent a lot of time really just going from one chairman to another chairman, subcommittee chairmen, running over to the Senate side, I learned in this process, again, negotiations and being willing to compromise. We ended up passing a bill that increased it from 0.5 to 1%, which means we doubled the percentage as is. And I also have a commitment from the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs to work with me and with other veterans organizations to get the word out, because what we're finding is that the veteran-owned businesses don't know of these state procurement opportunities.
Right. Now, as a Republican, it's supposed to be hard for you to be able to even meet with the Democratic leadership and be heard. At least that's what we've always heard from the Republicans who have represented us in the past, that the Democrats didn't want to listen to them. But somehow you're able to get these meetings and get things done. What's different? How do you operate that might be different?
Well, as I said at the beginning of the interview, this is a historic opportunity to serve. We have a new governor, a new Republican governor. We have the biggest class in 20 years of freshman members across the board, Democrats and Republicans. And as we talked about back in January, the new members, the freshmen, spent 3 days together on this bus tour, going to various facilities around the state. But it gave us the opportunity for us to get to know each other. And we want to be different. We want to show, number one, that when we can, we want to work together in a bipartisan fashion. I believe for the most part this session we did. There was a little disappointment at the end on the budget, but in the end, you can still look at that final budget and see that we still kept spending down, and that we were able to, again, to begin to rein in the spending. On the other issues and initiatives in the committee process, it's very clear that if you can identify issues in your home district that also affect other members in other parts of the state, on the other side of the aisle, people do want to work together. And I found, particularly with this Veterans Initiative, I want to point out that, again, locally driven, I had Chris Eccleston with Delmarva Veterans Builders came up and testified. I had the chairman of the House Veterans Caucus, a Democrat, Delegate C.T. Wilson, testify. I had Secretary George Owings, a Democrat who serves as our Veterans Affairs Secretary in both Ehrlich administration, now the Hogan administration, testify. So you find issues where there is that common ground, and then you work hard on them. I mean, again, when I found out that the subcommittee chairman and the chairman of the Health and Government Operations Committee did not want to do piecemeal procurement, I appealed to them to consider a slight increase for the veterans procurement to keep that on track, and then committed to working with them in a bipartisan fashion on overall procurement reform. So I think this is what the voters expect of us. This is what we talked about on the campaign trail. And now I've been uplifted and heartened to see that if you make that extra effort, you can work in a bipartisan fashion to move some of our shore priorities forward.
Now, this is going to sound really silly, and I apologize in advance, but if I Google your name right now, you know the bill that comes up first for you.
I do not.
It's the smoking marijuana in public bill. How did you get involved in that?
Well, that was and that ended up being a disappointment at the end, and something we're going to continue to work on. A little bit of background on that issue is, if last session when I was not here, I was not a member of the House of Delegates, there was legislation that decriminalized the possession of marijuana.
Right.
And just to be clear, decriminalization does not mean legalization. It means reducing the penalties. And when they reduced the penalties to make it a civil penalty for the possession of marijuana, they failed to decriminalize the drug paraphernalia. So last year they moved forward on that, and then they failed to move forward in lessening the penalty for drug paraphernalia. So this year, the House and Senate Judiciary Committees came back to, quote, fix that loophole. when we started to look at what it would mean to reduce the penalties for drug paraphernalia, we saw that it would no longer be a misdemeanor, a criminal offense, to use marijuana in public, on our boardwalk, in all our parks. So when we saw this, I offered an amendment to make the use of marijuana in public a misdemeanor and treat it the same way you would alcohol, because it was clear what I was hearing from the Ocean City boardwalk owners and families across the district. It doesn't make sense that you would be more lenient to use pot in public than it would be drinking alcohol.
Right.
And I offered that amendment, and it was accepted initially as a friendly amendment and was in the initial legislation. When the bill came back from the Senate side, that provision was stripped out. So I had to offer the amendment again, and this time it failed because supposedly our House leadership and members of the Judiciary Committee wanted a clean drug paraphernalia bill. I am absolutely committed to continuing the push for keeping the use of marijuana in public as a misdemeanor. And the reason that's important, and I talked to the Ocean City Police Chief about this, the reason you want to keep it as a misdemeanor is if you're able to actually physically get someone off the boardwalk, if they're using smoking pot on the boardwalk or in one of our parks, you can remove them by arresting them and physically getting them off the boardwalk, away from our parks. If it's only a citation, you issue a citation, and then that person can walk a block down and light up again on our boardwalk. So again, it's common sense. I believe that there is a support for this if we can separate it out from this other drug paraphernalia issue. And I'm going to continue to push for public safety in our public spaces.
I know you're a fan of Larry Hogan. How did he do?
Well, again, this is exciting that we have a governor, number one, who loves the shore. He has a place down here. He spends time down here. So that is so refreshing for all of us on the shore. And when you look at the governor's report card for the session, number one, we started by talking about the budget. Had he not introduced that original budget that eliminated the structural deficit in 1 year, that was the marker, and then we were able to work around that, and that's why we were able to make progress on the budget this year. So that's a win for the governor, and that's a win for the state of Maryland. Also, if you look at some of the other governor's initiatives that moved forward during this first session, we were able to get some tax relief for our military retirees and increase the tax exemption from $5,000 to $10,000. So that's a start, and that will affect our military retirees across the state. The governor also was successful in moving forward with the repeal of the rain tax. Again, he had to compromise on that. It wasn't the governor's original proposal. Senator President Mike Miller moved ahead with that, and we were able to pass that in the literally minutes before sine die at midnight the last day. And then also the governor's initiative on charter schools. Again, not the original proposal introduced by the governor, but a charter school proposal that does give more flexibility for teacher certification. So again, you look at it, I look at that, I think the voters look at it, I know the people on the shore look at that divided government can work and is benefiting the shore.
But that charter school thing, that surprised me because I did not expect it to be as contentious an issue as it turned out to be, especially at the end and as part of the budget.
I'm surprised that charter schools has been as controversial as it was this past session. I don't think it needs to be.
We've been talking about it for 20 years now. It seems like everybody understands it, but...
And what we're trying to do is just give options. It does not threaten the public school system at all. It does not threaten our public school teachers. And I think, again, with this one first step, this session, that we can begin to work on a charter school initiative that continues to give options to Marylanders across the state.
So, was it fun?
Yes.
What was the most fun day?
Where,
like the day where you're like, I am so glad I'm part of this.
At 10:22, the night before sine die, minutes before we're adjourning for the session was when the Veterans Bill went through on the Senate side. My House Veterans Bill had already gone through, and my bill had to clear the Senate for it to go to Governor Hogan's desk. And you just never know in the last, minute if anything's going to be pulled or they just don't have time to get to something. And so when I heard, and I actually received a phone call from the Maryland Veterans Secretary, George Owings, and said, they just passed your bill on the Senate side, because I was in the House chamber, again, working on the bills that we still needed to move through on the House side. And so that was such a highlight, given that it was such a common sense bill that we were just trying to increase the opportunities
Right.
for veterans. But when we found out all the challenges we were facing just to get a minimum increase, so when I heard that it finally went through, I just thought that was just a huge win for all of our veterans.
That's really cool. What about low moments? Were there any days where you're not like this? I can't imagine you ever being like this, but where you were like, what have I gotten myself into? Why am I doing this?
Probably the low light would have been when the leadership of the House did not read Governor Hogan's supplemental across the desk. And what that means is he offered a second supplemental during the budget negotiations that would have put some of these issues in play. And that included some money for state police, which the legislature had cut. And it also included protecting our pension, not raiding the pension fund for our state employees. And when the leadership did not have the courtesy of, putting that budget in play, and the way you put something in play in the legislature is you formally read it across the desk. That was a disappointment. I believe, though, we have learned from that, and I believe that communications will increase with our leadership in the House, the Senate, with the governor, and with those of us who, with 1 year under our belt, will be a little bit more assertive about communicating what we're hearing as far as the priorities back home. And if we're picking up information from the governor's office that we can share with our leadership, we'll continue to do that. So, I like to look at it that it's a learning moment.
Here at Wycomico, our county executive, Bob Culver, sort of made a decision about the future of West Salisbury Elementary based on what the governor told him about the likelihood of state funding for new school projects. But it seemed like the governor was really supportive of having the money available to build schools where they were needed. How did all that shake out in the budget? Do you feel pretty good about that, or is it going to be a challenge to get a new school built?
Well, I think Bob Culver was probably taking the direction the governor set as far
Sure.
as the challenges for the budget overall, whether we're talking the operating budget or we're talking the capital budget where we do the school construction projects. It's just so challenging. After sitting through meeting after meeting in the Appropriations Committee, where we're constantly being reminded that we're coming right up against our spending affordability cap,
Right.
I understand that when anyone moves forward and proposes a project, we need to know if the funding will be there. In this particular case, as I understand it, if there are other opportunities to look at how to move forward, does a renovation make more sense than a new school construction? I think all of that, we have to be so thoughtful in the process, because I am a little overwhelmed by our out-year fiscal obligations, and that's why I believe we have to keep the pressure on looking at changing the mandate, providing some mandate relief so we can make sure we fund the priority projects and don't overpromise on new projects.
Now, you amaze me. You ran a very long campaign. I mean, you were the first in and you worked every day at it forever. You got elected in a huge way. And then most people to go on vacation for a couple weeks. But then, no, you started preparing to be in the General Assembly. You just did your 90-day sit up there every day, 15, 20-hour days all the time. And now you're home and you're starting this going around and touring and meeting with people to find out more about what they think about the session. Are you ever going to take a break?
Well, I'm very excited about my round of constituent hours that are upcoming, and for a number of reasons. One,
So you're going to different places to meet with constituents, and it's a public thing. They can come in.
I'm making 11 stops district-wide.
11? Does it have to be 11?
I thought it was important to go back into the communities rather than have 2 or 3 town halls. I opted to hold what I'm calling Carozza constituent listening hours, where I will be in the communities, whether it's at the fire hall or one of the town hall buildings, that will allow me to be available 5 to 7 p.m. and we'll be coming out with the whole schedule of those dates now that they're locked in. I believe that gives people the opportunity to visit with me one-on-one to, number one, let me know what's on their mind, which will give me ideas for what I should be working on between now and the next session. Also, it will allow me to directly report on the session, as we're doing now, to be able to go into more detail if they were interested in a particular issue. We've been able to talk a little bit about a couple issues here, but usually when a constituent comes to visit with you, they might have 1 or 2 very specific issues. And that will allow me to give them a report on what happened during the General Assembly this first session, and if they have ideas on how we can continue to work on it next session. I want to hear this early so I can dig in and have that all teed up before the next session. One example is just last night at the Delmarva Poultry Dinner, I was talking to Charles Wright, chairman of the Wicomico Farm Bureau, and we were talking a little bit about our young people and when they leave and come back and how do we keep them here on the shore. And he pointed out to me that one of the reasons that some of our students go out of state are the ag production programs in other states, for example, NC State. Well, when I heard this, I thought, well, maybe we can beef up the University of Maryland and work with Salisbury University, UMES, Warwick. Maybe there's some courses we can offer here that would make it more attractive for our young people to pursue ag production right here in Maryland. So that gave me an idea, and had I not been out and about talking directly to Charles Wright about this, I would not know that that's something that I should follow up and work on. So I believe that these constituent hours, as I move around the district and give folks the opportunity in their own home communities to talk to me, I am excited about hearing their ideas and how we might be able to move forward, and they can help me shape our next set of shore priorities.
Well, I hope you report back to us after you've had the 11 different encounters out there in the public.
I'm excited about that.
Well, congratulations on your first session. Very exciting. She went to Annapolis. We had her back, and she's given us the report card, and it sounds like it was a good time.
It's great to be home.
Mary Beth Carozza, another one of those people who would never talk to me if I didn't have a TV show. It's just amazing. So keep watching us right here one-on-one on PAC 14.